My name is Emily Gross, and I am Director of Client Engagement at America's Charities. Those of you who are in the room this morning we've already met. But those of you who have joined us for the afternoon, welcome. So happy to have you here. This will be our final session of the day. So we're hoping that it'll pack a punch and make you happy and excited to, leave and go about going to happy hour. So let's see here. So I guess explaining a little bit about what I do in my role at America's Charities would be helpful. So I work with our member nonprofits on helping them raise more sustainable dollars through employee giving. And one of the main functions of my part of the client engagement team, as you can see, Jennifer and Brittany and Courtney, they're all part of my amazing team. Basically, what we do is we act as development consultants. That's what the best way to think of it, and also compliance specialists for our members. Essentially making sure that they can access these campaigns. A lot of them are heavily regulated. Employers want to make sure that they're giving to nonprofits that are vetted. So that's a big part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. However, we are trying to pivot more into the space of advocacy. And we're also trying to pivot more into the space of education and spreading awareness and spreading positivity and letting everybody know what an amazing force employee giving actually is. It's so funny how few people have actually heard of employee giving. Like, I don't know if how many of you have, asked friends or maybe you had, a former job where it just wasn't something that was familiar to folks. And so that's why we're trying to spread the message here and get folks introduced to the idea. So the topic of this panel really, we're grounding it in an education campaign of the same name. And we launched this earlier this year. Our goal with this campaign is to raise awareness of how when many people give, right, when we come together collectively, what a great impact that we can have on the world around us. It seems like something that, you hear a lot. I remember, for me personally, a big, realization of how the power of, so many people can come together and create change was with the Obama campaign, and how he really utilized grassroots fundraising for his campaign. And so just kind of taking that idea, right, and applying it to employee giving. And we want to explore why, we want to explore how employee giving and employee donors are saving the world one paycheck at a time. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce the folks who are on our panel today. I'm so happy because we have representatives really from all parts of all sides of this. So Ashley Helsing is Director of Government Relations with National Down Syndrome Society. They are a member nonprofit with us. Diane Smith is Senior Vice President of Human Resources at National Cooperative Bank, or NCB. Kat Williams is Director of Development at Animal Welfare League of Arlington, another member nonprofit of ours. And I'd like to just note that National Down Syndrome Society is a national member and that they're serving nationally. Animal Welfare League of Arlington is a more locally based member, so you're hearing both sides of the story here in terms of their reach. And then finally, Steve Greenhall is co-founder and principal of CSR Matters. Steve is just a whiz with figuring out, I don't know, everything. I mean, he helps us with our research. He's extremely knowledgeable about, the history of employee giving, about, why it's a motivator, about all of the factors kind of from a bird's eye view. So thank you all for being here today. Before I, kind of dive further into talking with our panelists, I'd like to first tell you more about the campaign. So if you're interested in finding more resources, ways to support this campaign, you can visit our landing page on our website, which is www.charities.org/changestartsatwork. This is where you'll find a number of webinar recordings as well that we've held over the past couple of months, 3 total so far, and we hope to just keep this series going. Looks like I skipped a slide here. So this webinar, actually, we just did, and this one was great because we got to hear from 2 very different nonprofits, Best Friends Animal Society and Southern Poverty Law Center, 2 completely different missions, who really value employee giving as part of their organizational development, and we got to hear how it really impacts the world around us through their delivery of services. And then we had 2 webinars earlier this year, one in February and one in March, where we talked with 2 folks that gave us some insight on the employer perspective. So Janelle on the right is with King County Employee Giving Program in King County, Washington. So that's the employee giving program, obviously, for King County employees. And then on the left, we have Susan O'Brien, who's the campaign manager of the New Jersey Employees Charitable Campaign. So we got to hear from them about, basically how they manage these programs, how they engage their employees, and best practices, and essentially what would happen, if these programs didn't exist, and why they're so valuable. And really at the heart of this campaign, our goal here is to make this argument that more employee giving will lead to greater social impact. It's just a fact, right? Overall, we keep hearing that not only does employee giving work for employees and employee donors as a retention tool, as a way to build culture and purpose, but it also works for nonprofits as this sustainable, predictable source of funding that is also unrestricted in most cases, meaning the nonprofit can apply it to any program area that they most need the funding in. So this is we see that there's actually some untapped potential, when folks haven't heard about employee giving or they're not aware of it as an option. There's this opportunity cost here that we need to explore. So essentially, it all makes sense too, because we spend on average, I looked it up last night, we spend on average about 2,300 hours per year at work on average. That's the average number of hours an American spends at work throughout the course of a year. But it really doesn't take that long, to achieve greater social impact through giving through these programs. And then you're also hitting, the pulse of the company, because you're approaching people where they're spending the majority of their time. So it just kind of makes sense that this could be a really, a really great force for change in our world. So what's stopping us from making that change, right? So it's really funny because we have this kind of joke internally within my department about, because sometimes when you work for a nonprofit organization, you'll reach the end of your day and you're like, I am exhausted. I am up against it all. You're not in it for the pay. You're in it because you really care about the mission, and you really care about what you do. But you start to feel like, do people really understand what a difference it makes when they give to us? Do people really understand? Now it is your job to communicate that impact, but we think of it as kind of like if we were to educate employee donors, employers, just the public at large about what the world would be like without employee giving, right? The George Bailey effect is what we call it. And there's actually science to back this up. UVA psychologists have studied the impact it has on us, in our brains when we focus on, what if questions, and how framing questions into what if this thing didn't exist makes us really realize their value, right? Obviously, I don't know how many of you have seen this movie or not, but I'll just summarize. So George Bailey, really, in It's a Wonderful Life, he has this opportunity to see how dreadful the world would be if he didn't exist, right? And unlike the movie, it's really not necessary for us to have a supernatural experience to see all the good that is generated through giving and volunteering. So this discussion today allows us to look at both sides of the coin. What would the world be like without employee giving, and what would the world be like with more of it? And what we're accomplishing right now because of it. So this campaign is really grounded in a number of questions. And I'll just run through them really briefly. These aren't really the questions that are going to undergird our discussion today necessarily, but this is what we're trying to answer in the long term. Again, what would happen if employee giving didn't exist? What real-world difference is it making? And why is payroll deduction considered, I guess the best way from the nonprofit perspective of giving? What changes have there been in this space, and how is it evolving? How can we amplify the discussion to make more people aware of its potential? And how does it help all stakeholders, employers, nonprofits, and individual donors to achieve greater social impact? So I'm going to go ahead and do a bit of an icebreaker here with our panels now that I've talked all that time. And I just want to go and ask each of you if you can just kind of share a little bit about yourselves, a little bit what your organization does, and when you first heard about employee giving. And I know, Ashley, I've got to share this mic with you as well. Over there.
Thanks so much, Emily. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Helsing, as Emily mentioned, Director of Government Relations for the National Down Syndrome Society. We are the leading human rights organization for all individuals with Down syndrome. At our very core, we are an advocacy organization. I run our National Advocacy and Public Policy Center here in DC. We work on issues across the lifespan, from healthcare, education, employment, economic self-sufficiency, and community integration. So anything that falls under those categories, we have our hand in to promote what is right and good for people with Down syndrome. A little bit about me and how I first heard about employee giving. Was actually starting this job 2 years ago at a nonprofit. I did not know that something like this existed. I worked for a small consulting firm before I joined NDSS, and prior to that I was in political campaigns. But what an amazing thing. In preparation for this panel, I asked our finance team how much money we raised from employee giving, and $150,000 in the past 2 fiscal years, which is for a small but mighty organization. That is a huge, huge number. So we're very grateful for employee giving, to say the least.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you this afternoon. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, especially amongst like-minded individuals who understand the importance of giving. It's about sustainability. A little bit about me. I am second in command in HR for National Cooperative Bank, and I've been running our employee giving campaign for the past 19 years. We have consecutively seen profitability and progress in participation because we stand by the concept that it starts at the culture level, that you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk it. And it starts at the foundational level, from your leadership right down to the type of employees you recruit. Who do you want to be? And that's who you should be recruiting, and that's what also you should be practicing in your day-to-day. What does giving look like to you? And we co-partner with our employees. But I heard about employee giving actually just before entering NCB because my parents were participating in giving campaigns at their employers, and I'm a native New Yorker. So when I heard that NCB was doing employee giving, it was like, yes. It aligns itself with my personal values. So it was a great fit and easy to take on. So glad to be here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kat Williams. I'm the Director of Development at the Animal Welfare League in Arlington, Virginia, just across the river. Today is, in fact, our 75th anniversary of since founding. So, thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. We're the animal shelter in Arlington County, and we provide basic animal sheltering and animal control services to the county, and adoptions and services like low-cost rabies and microchip clinics and so on to members of the greater DC area, and of course we adopt out animals to the same area as well. And employee giving programs contribute roughly $95,000 to $100,000 to our bottom line every year, and that makes a huge difference to the populations that we serve, both in the animal population, but also the people in our community who love and care for those animals who might need a little bit of extra assistance from us, and that sort of giving helps us to provide that. So happy to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Greenhall. I work with a company called CSR Matters. We're a small consulting firm that focuses on helping companies and nonprofits in their corporate social responsibility. Primarily, that's our corporate clients. Our nonprofit clients, we help them to figure out how to strengthen their relationships with their corporate partners or potential corporate partners. So glad to be here, glad that you're sticking with us through the afternoon session.
Yeah.
I thought a lot about how I first heard about employee giving. And I think it goes back a long time ago, I won't tell you how far, when I was working as a part-time teller in a bank, and it came the fall of the year, and there was an employee meeting scheduled, and we went, and our employer handed out pledge cards. And I grew up in a home that was constantly giving back, and in college I had opportunities to do fundraising events for different organizations, and I thought, how cool is this? How easy it is for me to make a difference. And so I participated, and have been participating ever since. I graduated from college, moved on, and actually went to work for a large nonprofit that was focused on employee giving and payroll giving. And now I've had the opportunity to consult with many large and small companies on their employee giving programs and how they make that evolution from a traditional kind of a model to a more open model, as well as working with corporations. And I'm pleased to say that you've heard a lot of a lot of references today about America's Charities research, and so I've had an opportunity to partner with America's Charities on those research projects. We did our first one in 2000, and then 2006, and then we came back in 2014 to 2013, I think, 13, 14, 15, and 17. So I'm pleased to be here, happy to share any insights that I might have about employee giving and why it's important and how it can save the world.
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you all for sharing. Steve, I'm going to first turn it over to you because you have such a good bird's eye view of this entire situation. If you could, give us some background on employee giving overall. So, holistically, what has been the evolution? What is going on with employee giving now? Why do you think it matters?
Those are big questions. We have seen a significant shift in what's happening in workplace giving. There are critics that would point to say that it's dead. It's no longer viable. I am a strong advocate that says that couldn't be further from the truth. The model may be dead, but giving at the workplace and engaging employees is still alive and well. And so what we've seen over the time is when I first got involved, that there was a single organization that was the driver and the recipient of charitable funds. There was no choice involved. You gave to that organization through your employer. It was a paper-based program. You gave through filling out your pledge card, I referenced that a moment ago at the bank, and you gave to that choice, and it happened once a year. The biggest changes that I've seen take place are the advent of choice. Now employers are giving their employees an opportunity to decide where they want their contributions to go. And as we've referenced a couple of times today, I've heard these stats cited, is that 3 in 10 people say they will not participate in an employee giving campaign if because their choices are not an option. And so choice is a driving factor in making sure that people want to participate, and it's critical to them. The other factor, and this was quoted earlier as well in the earlier session with Sarah and Tamara, that technology has had a tremendous impact in, number one, I think it's done a lot to help people think their contributions are secure, they're private. It's made it easier for them to give. Their employer's they're not handing to their superior a pledge form and say, oh, did you give? So it's done wonders in doing that. And now we say that having an easy, online, robust tool is essential to an employee giving campaign. So what we've seen happen is it's shifted from this, once a year kind of burden that was placed on employees, you will give, to now it's exciting, it's vibrant. I appreciate what Heather said earlier about the change that they've seen in their employee participation in PwC, which is what drives me to say it's not dead, it's alive and well. We just have to figure out how to make that model work. And it's all around employee engagement, it's all around engagement, with the nonprofits, it's all around making people feel like they're a part. Because we know, the research says, that a lot of these changes are being driven by generations, right? There's higher expectations of their employers, so how do we meet those expectations? So we've seen it go from sort of this once a year to evergreen, ongoing, year-round, vibrant, technology-driven, choice campaign that we have today in the workplace. It's making a difference because people will participate if given the opportunity, and the choices that they want to see are available to them. And so if companies will open it up to choice, will open it up to engaging with the nonprofits, people will follow their hearts and will give.
That's good.
Great, thank you so much. And I know that in your slides, and I had the pleasure of attending your workshop last summer, where you talked about the role of corporate citizenship and essentially how we're not just talking about workplace giving as this annual fund drive. We're talking about the entire identity of the company. So as a corporate citizen, and we talked about how corporate social responsibility then sits at the center of all of these different things, and that employee engagement and employee giving is just one facet of that.
Emily, if I could just comment on that for a moment, because what we found is that employee giving and social responsibility and volunteerism, all of those things are no longer nice to haves, they're imperatives. Employees expect that of their company, and they say, I want to work for a company that aligns with my personal values, but at the same time, I want to work for a company that allows me to give to my causes. That's why, I say it's alive and well, because what we have to do is figure out what those causes are and how to make those choices available to them. And so it does fit at that intersection of philanthropy, employee engagement, sustainability and governance, CSR, and employee engagement is a piece of that and an important piece of that.
Great, thank you. It's such a great summary and helps us kind of understand the context. So I'm going to ask Diane, can you share your perspective as somebody who runs an employee giving campaign, or program rather, for employees at NCB? Why does it matter to you? I think we heard a little bit of that already. Why does it matter to NCB, and why does it matter to NCB employees?
Sure. I've been fortunate to align my personal values with a company that I believe in We are a diamond in the rough in that while we are a financial services organization, I consider us a profit that behaves like a nonprofit. The people that we hire, the core values of who they are as individuals matches the mission of NCB. We are an advocate for cooperatives. We provide financial services to unique funding situations, and those funds directly keeps the sustainability of nonprofits alive. So we understand well the problem that you do not solve today becomes the issue that we now are faced with several years later. So the person that you don't provide services for today ends up being the very one that you have to address down the road. So for me, I think that employee giving is all about saving lives. And I understand for my personal life perspective is giving is a way of life. That everything that you touch, it's not enough just to live, but it's important that in your living, when you are gone, what is your legacy going to be? What are people going to say about you? And for me, it matters that someone can say, she lived a life that now that she's gone, people are still thriving because she chose to give. And so I believe that I am a culture ambassador and I'm a change ambassador. And it's not enough to just put a statement on your employee website or in your employee materials and say, oh, we believe in giving. But what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? It has to be embedded at the grassroots level. And everything that you touch throughout the year, you're reinforcing this concept of giving. So we put statistics all throughout all of our materials as to what our employees have been giving to. We let them write in as to where would you like to give. If it's not on our campaign site, write it in. Next year, you're going to see your name on the list as to what organization would like to be included. We solicit our employees' opinion. We want to hear from you. Who do you want us to give to? Tamara mentioned in her segment that we do a different employer match in that our match funds a corporate contribution committee. So the employees get to choose. We want to tell you as an organization where we want to give to for the year. And so the employees meet on a monthly basis. It's strictly volunteer. You sign up. You always simply ask us, well, why do you want to participate? And 9 times out of 10, they say, well, you know, I've been impacted by the services of these organizations, and I want my fellow colleagues to also participate and benefit. And so we review all the nonprofit requests for funding, and then they determine which ones you want to give to, and we just simply, on a monthly basis, write the check to who they've asked us to give funding to. We do volunteer days throughout the year. We give, so I say, incent people to give. Make it easy for them to give. And not just in time, but also match their dollars in letting them know, we want you to give, because it's about survival. If we don't see ourselves as global citizens and recognize that we're all more alike than we are different, we're doing ourselves a disservice and we're in denial. So.
Wow. Well, thank you. It's going to be a tough one to follow. So we're hearing the passion, we're hearing the dedication of these individuals that make up NCB, that drive this program, and I'd like to hear from Ashley and Kat. Maybe I can start with you, Ashley, and then I'll move to Kat, about essentially what employee giving means to your nonprofits. So what are you able to achieve as a result of the giving?
So much to summarize. But probably, one of our biggest accomplishments as an organization was the passage of the Achieving a Better Life Experience Act, the ABLE Act, back in 2014. The ABLE Act set up savings accounts for individuals with disabilities so that the asset limitations that are currently under SSI and Medicaid and other federally means-tested programs, those don't apply anymore. So you can put money into these accounts and keep your benefits. So for generations, we've told families, do not save money. Your child will lose their benefits. You cannot save for their future. They will lose their benefits. And for the first time, families with children with special needs can save for their futures. They can save for college. They can save for later in life when they might not be around. So that is what so much of this money goes towards, is actionable advocacy for change. $150,000 in 2 years. That helps us buy tools that engage our grassroots, that are really the core of our advocacy. We're able to text the members of our grassroots and say, we need you to call your member of Congress right now to ask them to support this bill. It helps pay for our advocacy days, where we bring in people from across the country to advocate in DC before their member of Congress and tell them what is important to them as a person with a disability or a person who has a family member with Down syndrome. It does so much. So we definitely look forward to continuing to do this amazing work because of programs like this.
So it does. For us too, needless to say, as I said, we get roughly $95,000 to $100,000 a year through workplace giving, and it is unrestricted, as it was pointed out earlier. So to put it in context, we have about a $3.5 million operating budget. Of that, we get about $1.4 million from Arlington County for our animal control services and basic animal sheltering. That's like a roof over their heads and, maybe some kibble. So anything, between that, we have to raise annually. And so having that dependable, unrestricted income that comes in can help us with behavioral problems, with medical issues, both chronic and emergency, that would otherwise maybe mean that the animal is euthanized as opposed to being given a chance at a good life, but because of resources wouldn't be, the resources make that possible, that we don't oftentimes even have to think about taking in a diabetic cat and being able to, taking in a diabetic cat and treating it and actually adopting it out. That's a new thing that we can do now, or giving an animal eye surgery or heart surgery, or mending a broken limb or something. And then beyond the animals, we are also able, with money like this, to provide for the people who love and care for them, because we're not just about the animals. So we have a pet food pantry for people to come avail themselves of. And this year we were able to help people during the government shutdown with that pantry. So it had a different use, and we were thrilled to be able to be a resource. We're able to provide low-cost spay-neuter vouchers, emergency vet assistance grants. This is an expensive area to have an animal, and so sometimes just having the ability to front someone some money to care for their animal in the short term has long-term benefits, because ultimately keeping an animal out of the stressful shelter environment is ideal. So funds like this make a huge difference. And I just want to add one note that we're trying ourselves, in conjunction with our 75th anniversary today, we have our biggest fundraiser of the year tomorrow, our Walk for the Animals. And our CEO challenged our employees to raise $10,000 toward the goal of $100,000 for this walk, and we're at $9,700. And the benefit to the employee, a couple of days off, depending on how much you raise in the top three, I think, and the number one choice or winner gets to name the song that our CEO will sing in karaoke in front of anybody. So that was a huge incentive, and also gives our staff colleagues a sensitivity to what employee giving groups are doing, or other donors. So it's not just give us the money and we'll spend it. It hits us in our pocketbooks too, and makes us really grateful and appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you both. I think it's just so great to hear both of your stories. So I want to turn it back to Steve and Diane. I think, Steve, you touched on this a little bit about the changes, but would like to hear a little bit of more elaboration and maybe a more contextualized understanding how employee giving has changed since you became involved with it. How is employee giving evolving in the sense that how can employers respond to meet these changes? And maybe, Diane, could I start with you?
Sure.
And then,
Sure. So when I joined the organization, we was doing old-fashioned, pass out the pledge form. Oh, please join us in the cafeteria. We're about to do a phenomenal giving campaign. And, you know, people are like, well, I want to secure my information. Who's going to see it? And so we did daily raffles. We were like, oh, don't worry. Just bring your form. It's only going to be me that see it. And then we partnered with America Charities, and their platform has amazingly heightened our ability to not only engage, but make giving easy. So we went to the online platform. I do believe that it has to be a hybrid of not only online, but you've got to get out behind. I'd go from cube to cube with my little cart and talk to people and say, hey, can I count on you to join in? You know, the campaign's going to be on this day, because you have to realize everyone don't have the same style of communication preference. So how do we diversify our approach so that we can reach a larger reach? But the advancement with the giving platform and being able to have the payroll deduction, I think, makes for a seamless experience. And look, we get their money before they spend it. So we're like, okay, before you even begin to divvy up your money, can we do some good? So it really incents people to understand, well, I don't even have to think about it. It's already coming out my paycheck. So that has been a drastic change over the years. It has really heightened the ability to incent people to do good.
Steve?
I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest changes we've seen in workplace giving is the introduction to choice. And, you know, employees want to be able to give to the organizations that they believe in and they personally support. And I think we've heard two good examples of that today. You know, when you get, how could you turn down, you know, Ashley or Kat? And there are thousands of you, not thousands, but literally many of you in the room today that represents worthwhile organizations. And I just pulled out some notes. And I mentioned that we did our first America's Charities Research Project in 2000. You might be interested to know that in 2000, less than 10% of the companies, it was only a handful of companies, said they did electronic giving. Today, it's well over 70% that are doing electronic type giving. People want to be able to give from their phones. They want to be able to give wherever they are. You know, at night they think about it. They want to be able to log in and give. And so technology has certainly driven that. And a lot of that's driven by generational changes. I mentioned that earlier ago, where, you know, people come with different expectations. You know, it used to be, oh, I give to charity because that's just the right thing to do. I'm altruistic, I want to do it. Now it's and this is not a criticism at all, it's, well, what's in it for me? You know, how can I be benefit from this? And we answer that by saying you can give to the choices you care about. The employer's going to match. That's the other change we've seen. In 2000, less than 20% of companies said they match, and now it's over 70% that match payroll giving. There's always been a matching gift component that match payroll giving. So you double the impact. Why do people give to the workplace? They're going to give to the workplace because their gift is double, because their employer will match. There was very few companies. It was called the United Way campaign in 2000. You know, and now companies will brand it. You know, it's going to be, we saw a couple of examples today about, you know, CARES is a common brand. People will brand their campaign. And more people are incorporating social media tools, that's the whole technology, to allow others to tell you why they give and invite you to join them, because there is that personal touch, right?
You talked about that too with the personal touch. We do the testimonials where you gave, and then also we post how much people are giving. They wanted that.
Yeah.
I want to see what my fellow peers are giving to, and so we share those stories, and they say, you know, it's glad, and then let the charities tell us when they send in letters, hey, your $5,000 that you gave did this for us. We post it. It really makes a difference when people see that their money is actually doing good.
That's the other thing, is people want to know, is my contribution making a difference?
Yeah.
So allow them to tell that story, and allow the nonprofits to tell their story, right? Because they want to know that the nonprofit is reputable and is using the money wisely, and they're making a difference through their gift. The other thing I would say, just to sum up what Diane said, I think if I could kind of sum it up, we've gone from a kind of a tops-down approach where people said you will give and this is where you'll give and this is how you'll give, to a bottoms-up approach. And it's working very, very well. I love the example we saw from Tamara and Sarah, where somebody went out and employees got a chance to say, this is where I give and how I give and why I give. It's those testimonials. I did a research project that said, you know what, it used to be the old letter from the CEO, you will give. What's more important to them now is, where are my peers giving? And I want to be with my peers. I want to join them. So those are some of the changes. It's driven by technology, it's driven by generation, but it's all positive, because what we're doing is we're enabling and we're empowering a workforce to give to charity. And while I may not necessarily support the same charity you do, I respect that you do, and I will help you in your cause and then invite you to help me in my cause as well. So those are some of the, and I think they're all positive changes. The corporate match has made a big difference in getting employees to give at the workplace, because they can give through Facebook, they can give directly, they can give through credit card. Those are all fine, wonderful things. But here they're engaging in a community at the workforce where it's matched by their employer, they engage with senior leadership, they engage with their peers, and they're making a difference.
There's one unique thing that we do that I really want to throw out to anyone who's an employee that has influence, and that is at our annual offsite, we delegate 5 hours of our day. The first 3 hours is reporting, of course, financial successes, wins for the organization, but the remainder of the day is doing a charitable activity together. We build beers, we build bikes. We have asked Women's Giving Back to come in, and we delegate the entire afternoon to, okay, who can we help? And we let the employees decide which nonprofit do you want to come in, and we do something for them for that day. And we've been doing it for the last 10 years, and it's something to see the faces, people that you didn't even know had emotions, just come completely unglued, like, oh my gosh, Diane, I can't, can we do this next year? And we let the employees decide, who do you want the speaker to be? Go gather up feedback as to who you think needs our money and needs our time. So.
Can I comment a second? I love that you all do that you invite the nonprofit to you, because one of the challenges that we have in this new employee-driven workplace giving movement, I would say, is that a lot of people want to volunteer on site at our organization, which we love and welcome. But sometimes it's hard for us to find appropriate opportunities with limited resources, primarily in staff time, for those people to do it. So to be invited out to represent and to prepare and say, you know, your work is helping us do this, achieve this, is really great. So if you're considering that as a for-profit with an employee giving program, we nonprofits would appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and that was a great segue, Kat, into my next set of questions. So we did research in 2017, and one of the key findings was that some of the things that donors want the most are the hardest things for nonprofits to deliver on. We talked about communicating impact, demonstrating impact to donors, showing the relevance, communicating effectively, and obviously the volunteer question, right? More and more companies want to have a volunteer component, and that is amazing, and that's wonderful. But we kind of want to walk through what the impact of changing donor expectations has had, and I will say the changes overall, all of the changes that Diane and Steve talked about. What is the impact of that on your respective organizations, and how are you working to acclimate yourselves?
Yeah, sure. So that is definitely one thing that our donors want is results. That said, legislation is always a long game. So, some of our priorities that we're working on right now, a bill that will, under current law, people with disabilities can be paid below minimum wage. And we've seen wages as low as 5 cents an hour. So this is something that we are actively pushing to phase out on the Hill. And, this fight has been going on since really the 1970s. This is, so again, a very long game. So it's not necessarily, I think, that our donors are like, we need to see this phase out, right immediately now, but they want to see that we're making progress. So being able to communicate that out and, show that we're active on the Hill, communicating when our advocates are on the Hill and making that change. And so, I think communication is definitely a big part of that.
I love how you also said that you take any feedback from the nonprofit that says how your funds are being used and share that with your employees. That's incentive for me to communicate more often and more eloquently, if possible, to our donors to let them know that the specifically what their giving is helping make possible, because it brings it to life, doesn't it? I think that's maybe I've jumped the gun. I'm sorry, and had talked about the employee.
Not at all.
donor.
That's the flow of the logic
So,
here.
can I say something that would add to what Kat said? The American Charity staff have heard this many, many times, but several years ago we did a research project for nonprofits, and we said, how are the changing expectations of corporations impacting your nonprofit? Because nonprofits are very hesitant to say no, right?
That's
When a
right.
corporation or a corporate partner calls you and says, we want to come out and bring a big team of volunteers, of course you're going to say yes. Not every nonprofit organization is conducive to having volunteers on site. For privacy reasons, for security reasons, for safety reasons, they're just not allowed. So one of the stories that we've told the American Charity staff, have heard this many times, one nonprofit said, we don't say no. That's why we painted the wall of our shelter 7 times in the last year.
Oh, wow.
That's right. And honestly,
Wow.
we don't want people to come and paint that wall once more. We don't need that. That's a waste of your time. That's a waste of our time and resources. Paint, you name it. So we try to think very creatively about how we can engage people, because we know. In our case, we have adorable animals, right? So we want to grant people the opportunity to have that connection, and because that tells our story most effectively. But also for safety reasons, we can't necessarily accommodate a group of people. The animals are our first priority. So, a group of 50 people oohing and aahing over a frightened dog is just not ideal. So anyway, we're sensitive to it, and we are trying. But think about that when you make your request or try to accommodate, because we do always say yes. So how do we set yes and this is how it would benefit us?
Great, thank you so much. And it's just clear from both of you that you want to foster deep, meaningful connections with the private sector, and the value that you see in those connections, and how much it means to you that these employees give, and their time and their money, and how that changes our world, truly. So I want to kind of ask a question that will hopefully tie this up in a neat little bow. So, we talked about this George Bailey effect, right? We've talked about, how, looking at the impact and imagining what would happen, if these programs didn't exist for NDSS. It would mean less advocacy for people who need it, and for AWLA, it would mean
Animals might not make it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right. So I think for all of you, I would love to hear your thoughts on how we're all change makers in this room. How can we, change makers, help spread the word better? How can we help communicate employee giving as this vital mechanism for social impact? Yeah, I'd like to hear that. It's a tough question.
I think, it goes back to what Diane said about culture and just making it part of your fabric, encouraging your employees to to give to the organizations of their choice, because it's very, the Down syndrome community in particular is very interesting. I'll be in a random place and somebody, will see my name tag or see my business cards and they'll say, oh, I have a sister, or I grew up next to somebody who had Down syndrome. So while, we might not be at the top of their radar, giving NDSS as an option for somebody to give to might strike something, and then they might reach out and say, I'm looking at this issue and what you guys are working on and all of that. So, one step at a time, part of the culture.
Oops, I think it's died. Sorry. It's clearly it's time to wrap it up, right? Yes, I think the shift in employee giving is also visible in giving in general. At least as a director of development, my mindset is to connect with our donors with what their passion is, right? So it's moved from give to us because we deserve it to what makes you want to give and how can we make that possible for you, and I like that, and I think that that's the way that employee giving is going to thrive, and is if we communicate how we want to engage with those people who are working hard to give us their money.
I definitely piggyback on both of you young ladies' statements because it is so important. We often say we want to do good, but it has to start at the mission level, the vision level, budget to do good, and then make it easy for your employees to participate and volunteer. And sometimes employees just don't know. And you know what you know, and don't be afraid to say you don't know. When I need help, I'm like, hey, who wants to help me plan this year? And you'd be amazed. People will respond and say, hey, Diane, I'd love to vet you on this idea. And let them know, hey, I've heard you. Come sit down and talk with me. And I give them honest feedback and say, I may not be able to do it today, but I promise you, you will know that you were heard.
I think the message that we've heard today is that companies are now listening to their employees. Employees have a significant voice in what the company supports, what charities are eligible to participate in the employee giving campaign, what opportunities are available to volunteer. And so I would just offer a suggestion, and that is to use your donors, your supporters, your board, your volunteers as champions and advocates within their company. Find out what opportunities exist for them to invite you into the workplace, to give seminars, to provide information, to provide education. Encourage them to use their social media to talk about you internally inside the company and to talk to their peers and to talk to their colleagues and their associates and to let them be your voice, your advocate, your champion inside that company. It will resonate. Talk to their friends and their peers. And finally, I just want to say thank you to this panel. It's been great. And Kat, a special thanks because you have your biggest fundraiser tomorrow.
Thank you. I wouldn't have missed it.
Still make
Great
it.
success.
Wait till tomorrow.
All right, so I think with that, we'll go ahead and take any questions from the audience.
Hi, this is Tracy Fun with Washington Gas. Not so much a comment, but as a corporate entity that does do a lot of employee volunteerism, I would chastise anyone in here, and I go back to the reference of the paint the wall 7 times. I'm trying to find a delicate way to say it. As a person in my space who reviews the grant request and the employee volunteers request, I would be miffed to learn that we were coming out just to paint the wall because you were afraid to say no. So I'll counter that by saying, look at your strengths and your needs. And if an organization says, hey, we'd like to give you some money, and by the way, our employees want to come out and paint the wall, be authentic. Just say, we don't need that service at this time. However, maybe because you're, and I'm thinking the Animal Welfare League has a great opportunity, but you're limited because of the liability issue of working with the animals. So maybe you come up with a creative alternative. Well, can we get 50 employees from your company to post pictures of our dogs, cats, or animals in the shelter? So don't be afraid to spin it around, because I think you'll do more damage by thinking you're offending them to say no than you would have just saying, I'm sorry, that's not something we need right now, and then move on to something else.
That's a wonderful feedback. Thank you. And we do say no a lot, which makes me feel bad. But we don't want to waste people's time and energy, and to create bad feelings because of that. But I love that suggestion. We also, for events and things, pop-up opportunities, we suggest, maybe you'd like to help us with our event, because you don't need special training, for that. And we've gotten a lot of great new people, one-time or repeat people to work with us on that. So I don't want to imply that we have a wall that's been painted 16 times, because we don't, because we do say no. But I always want to say yes, and so it's my challenge to find meaningful ways. And it's nice to hear that coming on site isn't necessarily the necessary. We always think, oh, everyone wants to come because of the animals, but if sharing on social media or some other way of capitalizing on your networks is something that your employees would do, then we'll do that. Also,
A no now will be a much more impactful yes down the line.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you all. Thank you all for sharing. It's very informative. My question is for Diane. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you work with your employees to make the decision about which organizations you're going to support and how often you do that.
So we do it on a monthly basis. So we have a rotational program. So essentially we want to give everyone an opportunity to participate. And we recognize trying to get 50 and 80 people in a room together, you can imagine the diversified opinions. So we make them write an essay. Why do you want to participate? What do you think you can contribute to making the decision about what organizations we give to? And then the existing committee of that particular calendar year select based on, we vote, we literally old school. Okay, 5 for this person, 4 for that person. And then we wait list them, because we don't want them to feel like you don't matter. It may not be at that moment, but we let them know, don't worry, as soon as someone vacates or as life goes, someone may move on to another department and say, hey, I got too many deliverables, hey, I can't do it this month. Then we say, hey, you wanted to participate, come on down. But essentially, you'll be amazed, our employees, okay, I see we have 1 minute. Our employees actually do the research. They actually go and research your organizations and come back, and they have to do homework. Hey, I looked them up. This is what they do. They're legitimate. And they debrief us, and that's how we do it.
That's great.
So I'm sorry.
Thank you.
No, you're
Okay.
good. I'm going to have to borrow your mic.
Oh, sure.
Because mine just died. So
Filling time.
like you said, a cue. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this session up and hand it over to Heather, our new board chair, to wrap up the day for us. All right. Round of applause, please, for Emily and team. Thank you, guys. That was fantastic. I am about to invite you all to join us up on the 14th floor for happy hour. I want you to just humor me for a couple more minutes before we do that. I'm going to ask you some strange questions. Who here has ever rented a movie from Blockbuster? Who here has watched a movie in the past year? Who here has rented a movie from Blockbuster in the past year? This is the kind of thing that actually keeps me up at night, thinking about how do I, in the work that I'm doing, make sure that I'm thinking like a Netflix and not a Blockbuster, right? Like, how do I stay relevant? How do I innovate?
this panel, and Steve in particular, just walked us through a whole list of ways that workplace giving has innovated over the past 10 years. I think it would be dead if we hadn't. And that example expands to so many things in life, right? I think the work that everyone in this room is doing is so important that you really owe it to yourselves and your colleagues, your clients, your beneficiaries, the whole ecosystem to innovate and not get outdated. I mean, in our line of work, if you can work yourself out of a job because it's so successful, we can call that success, right? But I also think it's on us to stay ahead of these curves as other people come along and say, yeah, I'm into CR now too. Oh, I'm into giving back too. We're defining what that means. I mean, you heard this great dialogue here between Tracy and Kat around how to do it most effectively. It's because we talk to each other. And this kind of education that we can give each other, this is one of the things that initially drew me to America's Charities, this incredible convening power, the high quality of people that they get in one room at one time to have this kind of conversation. This is what's going to keep us all on that path to innovation instead of getting outdated. And so I'd like to really thank all of you for being a part of this today, and especially thank our amazing world-class staff at America's Charities. If I could ask you all to stand up so everyone knows who you are. This is the team that's able to be with us here today. But really, I couldn't be more proud to serve all of you as part of this organization. So thank you so much for bringing us together today.